Hello and welcome to the Fast Track Working From Home Response. Today I'm joined by Jeff Alexander and Stephen Dillon, who are SMEs, subject matter experts in the Fast Track Centre. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today.
Thanks, Simon. Good to be here, mate.
Okay, so this is going to be largely an unstructured session. I'm going to ask Stephen and Jeff to talk on a couple of questions. First question, gentlemen, is working remotely part of pandemic planning strategy for staff a viable option, do you think? Jeff, I'm going to start with you, mate.
Yes, I think it's starting to be. Certainly, the customers I've been dealing with are starting to weave the working from home into their plans as we start to send more and more users home. I'm working with several customers that are starting to send their users home in stages. They might send 500 home, they might send home 1,000, but they're going to start to send more and more people home. And of course, you know, some of the customers I deal with, not everybody has a laptop, not everybody has a machine that they can take home. So there's a number of things that we'll cover throughout the rest of this talk that certainly we need to think about. What do they need at home? You know, what do they need to be able to actually do their job and be productive and get access to the applications and, you know, resources that they need to do their job effectively when they're in a work from home environment.
I think you have a customer, Jeff, don't you, that large Australian government customer that couldn't purchase enough laptops in time or something like that?
Yeah, they went, they jumped onto retail. I think they basically probably hired a bus and just went out to filled it up with laptops. Now they're ordering additional laptops as well. So I think, you know, people are making, certainly adding this into their work from home scenarios, you know, because when you say work from home, what does that actually mean? You know, what is that? There's a whole bunch of things that come into that. And I think a lot of my customers are just focusing on, first of all, the baseline, getting them the right device to be able to use as a laptop or whatever it actually is, to be able to integrate that into somebody's home to be able to work remotely. So it's that's the first part. There's obviously a lot of other pieces to the puzzle, but we're certainly starting to see customers begin to add that in as a key consideration for these strategies.
Stephen, that's something that you're seeing as well, mate?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, not only is it a viable option, it's a necessary option. And of course, working from home is now being mandated by governments across the world. So if you're not already having employees working from home, you will have at some point, whether that tilts from 5% to 90% of your employees. It is going to vary, of course, but that will open up new scenarios, new ways of working, and new challenges that haven't really been addressed yet or even considered, to be honest. So we need to make this transition as secure as possible, make it a highly available transition so that, you know, they're not cut off at certain times, at peak demand times or something like that, but also that it's one that's giving them full functional access to their day-to-day job and the tools that they need to do that day-to-day job. It's definitely part of the mix.
You mentioned challenges. What are the sorts of things that you're seeing from your customers? What are they asking you?
Well, one, as Jeff just mentioned, is around, you know, we don't have enough devices. So what do we do? And one option there is to allow the users to use their own home devices. But of course, that comes with risk. Like if I'm using a device that's shared by my teenage kids or my partner or whatever, or I'm just using it generally to do my own productivity, hobby work or whatever. How do I use that same device in a way that's secure, still lets me get full access to my role and my tools needed for my role? But doesn't contaminate that session, if you like. And there's different options that we can talk about around that, different constraints, different options, different risk vectors that need to be considered for the different solutions.
Jeff, what are you seeing? Stephen there talked about risk vectors. What is the risk to our customers? What's the challenge here? Isn't it just I can just plug my phone in and away I go?
Well, yeah, there are a number of risks. I mean, the risk that you actually see is that, you know, a person at home may not have the right infrastructure to actually support working from home. You know, what's their broadband situation at home? What kind of room do they have? Do they have a quiet place to actually go and do their work? Are they going to get distracted and go, you know, put the dishwasher or the washing machine on? There's a lot of things that come into that, right? And so, you know, there's an element of, yes, we need to get the right device there, but then does the user know and is the user focused enough to be able to actually work like they do in the office? You know, there's a number of factors that come into that. And, you know, IT's worried about securing the device. The user's probably about, how do I stay productive while I'm working in a home environment? There's, you know, it comes down to a lot of what, you know, we can provide within our platform. And I think our illustrious leader, Brad Anderson, said, you know, we want an environment that's trusted by IT and, you know, delights our users. So this, at this time, it's more and more prevalent that we need to be able to secure these devices as they make their way into the home, or even if they're a BYOD device, but still give that user a like-for-like experience. You know, I think working on your mobile phone is probably not going to be you know, the best experience. While you can get some stuff done, you certainly can't get you know,
you can read, but can you write? Yeah,
you can consume. You can't read stuff. I mean, you can't write stuff. You can't get line of business apps very well on those devices. And, you know, we see a resistance from users to want to use their personal devices to do work. So organizations are going to have to really provide a device that's going to allow a user to do that. So they're going to certainly run into pushback, I would imagine, from their user community going, I don't want to use my personal device to do work. So they're going to run into those challenges as well.
Great answer. Stephen, building on that, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, building on that, you know, not only are we in a position where we need to send users home to work, and perhaps there's some pushback from the user on using their home device, and maybe with good reason. It's also a process of communication and collaboration with the users to make sure that they understand what the necessary requirement is, to make sure that they are safe, to make sure that we as an organization are safe, that their data isn't compromised by what we're doing, and likewise that the work they're doing in work isn't compromised by whatever they're doing at home. So keeping those two personas, those two working practices siloed in a way that's still both functional and secure.
So we've talked at a high level about this need, right? So there's a physical need, and there's device need, and there's a need for security. If I'm a customer, then what am I looking at? What do I need to be doing? What's Microsoft providing to make those devices secure? Steve, I'm going to start with you.
Oh, there's different ways. I mean, if it's depends on the use case. If it's just one application, then obviously you could focus on just making that application secure, and we've got different tools and technologies to help you to do that, such as application proxy, which effectively means you're running the application in a secure pipe from the desktop back to the core application running on premises or in Azure. So there's that, for example, and then there's where the user might need multiple productivity tools, multiple configurations, very fine-tuned to their requirements, with AD policies protecting them, with rights access, with information protection, blah, 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 already configured in the desktop at work. How do we provision that to the user at home? And one way to do that is to establish a Windows virtual desktop. So in other words, we've got this running in Azure with everything that they need to do their job, and then they just need a secure channel from home into that and run everything there. And then everything else outside of that session, so it's session-based rather than application, everything outside of that session still continues to run as they want to, you know, watch their cartoons or develop their own apps or whatever else they're doing at home, right?
Good answer.
So, and there's multiple other options available as well.
Jeff, would you expand on that?
Yeah, look, I would start with Microsoft 365. I mean, we're obviously not salespeople in this on this call today, but certainly we know that we have Microsoft as a platform called Microsoft 365, which includes everybody's favorite operating system, Windows 10, Office 365, and then the ability to manage that within the cloud. So I certainly think that everything within there, and being able to make sure that when a user goes home, the identity that they're actually using to access the information they need to access is secured, and we provide that in the platform. Another big question we're getting is, how do I turn on multi-factor authentication when a user goes home?
I was going to say,
you know, that's probably one of the bigger requests we're getting. The next one would be, how do I implement data leakage policies so that, hey, a user's at home and they're not taking data from that device on a USB key and, you know, putting it somewhere they're not supposed to, right? So things like the DLP policies and the DLP protections that we have within our platform are going to make a really big difference and make it easy for customers to be able to secure the devices, but also securing the data and the user's identity. Because we all know that in this time, there's going to be an increase of insecure workstations, and hackers are very good at taking advantage of these types of times. So we want to make sure that we protect them, and we're going to see an increase of a lot of users attending meetings remotely. So our Teams platform is going to be ideal, which is what we're talking to you on today, to be able to attend, because most of what people are going to do is going to be attending meetings remotely. So how do they do that? How do they work on documents? How do they collaborate with their team members? There's a raft of things they need to do. But if you're focusing on making sure that those devices and those users are comfortably secure, you got to start with some baseline stuff within the Microsoft 365 platform.
Talk some more about MFA then. If I as a customer don't have that set up now, how do I go around doing it? Is it easy, quick?
It's relatively straightforward, and there's different ways to turn it on. I think there's about 8 different ways you can turn on multi-factor authentication. And it depends, again, if you're giving them a secure device that they can take home, then you can enable MFA before you actually give them that device. But if you can't distribute sort of hardware secure devices, then you need to leverage things like Windows Hello biometrics. So the user's biometrics is tied to their login. And using Windows Hello in that way, or the smartphone authentication apps like Microsoft Authenticator, if they're going to use a phone. So it will dial into the phone onto the Authenticator app. So it's not like using.
I've got that on my phone.
Yeah.
MFA is a fairly straightforward thing to do. I mean, the first thing you need to do is have your identities in the cloud. So customers need to make sure that they're syncing their identities to the cloud, and most of our customers do with Office 365. Once they do that, it's just a case of going and turning on the service.
Turn it on.
But the other side of this is also to make sure that the user doesn't get blocked because they're working from home. Because there are policies that you can set that look for patterns and practices of usage, and then it might automatically block them from working at home if they're using Defender ATP, for example. It's typically looking for attackers, attack vectors coming from a different place than usual. So you need to consider that and look at your Microsoft Secure score to see how remote working policies affect your compliance, affect your risk surface.
I wonder if we should run that, Steve, as perhaps a future session. Get a
Definitely.
mirror in it.
Yeah, and that leads me in, Stephen, to my favorite. I used to be an identity TSP, and conditional access is probably the secret sauce that we have in our platform. The ability to set up a condition. Think of it as the old if then, if this, do that kind of scenario.
It is exactly that, yeah.
So it's basically, Microsoft sees terabytes of data that comes into our cloud, and we already have that data in. So when a user goes to auth into the service, we can look at their identity. Is their identity under attack? What location are they actually coming from? What device are they coming on that they're using, and what application are they accessing? Then what we can do is make a decision. Well, what are we going to do? If they're at home, we might want to challenge them for a multi-factor authentication. That might change now in the world of working from home. We might not want to be challenging our users every day when they're working from home. We might want to just challenge them for multi-factor authentication when they're accessing that super sensitive line of business application, not just general day-to-day activities. So we have the flexibility to customize it.
As well as the Azure AD conditional access policies, we've also got Microsoft Intune app protection policies. So if you're using Intune today, or maybe considering Intune, you can help use those two things together to manage and secure your corporate data, but only on approved apps. So applications that you've approved on the personal devices, and not the things that they've downloaded and installed separately that may not be such a secure application. For example, Intune automatically discovers new devices as a user connects with that device. It will then prompt them to register the device and then sign in with the company credentials so that it's then registered in Intune. And then we can tick that box that they're on a secure device now.
And it's all devices. It's all, it's not just Windows devices. It's iOS, it's Android, it's Mac OS. We realize that the organizations, when they send their users home, they might be using a MacBook. They might be using something else. Well, we have the ability to support BYOD through what Stephen just mentioned around Intune mobile application management, to be able to protect using application protection policies to protect just at the application layer. It might be a personal device, but when they're using a corporate identity, we want to make sure that we're protecting that data. So multiple options to support that work from home scenario.
Got one other scenario actually, Jeff, and that is the users might be sent home. They might work for my company, but they're sent home, but actually they need to engage with other companies on behalf of my company. And so we've got facilities like Azure AD B2B, business to business. So we can look at that if you've got that scenario where the users need to talk to suppliers or partners or something like that.
I hadn't actually thought about that. That is a very good point, and that's ticking around in my mind right now, Stephen, that in this scenario, Azure AD B2B and B2C is going to be very big as we start to distance ourselves and be able to remotely work. That's a very, very good point, Stephen, and something maybe we can talk about in a little bit more depth on a future podcast or videocast or whatever we're calling this.
Because it's that maturity model, isn't it? We've been very focused on getting people working from home because of the lockdown. But then we've got to maintain this state for at least 4 weeks, maybe longer, who knows? And that's going to require B2B.
To be honest, Simon, I see this this sudden sort of crisis, this need to shift to a working from home pattern. I see that as bringing long-term benefits to most organizations. It's a big disruption at the moment, but I think as we come out of this coronavirus thing, it's going to be a breakthrough in new ways that we do work, and working from home will just be as natural as anything else today. It might actually help towards some of the other environmental issues we've got today as well. Longer term, it might do some good to all work from home. Yeah,
and you'll see there won't be everybody working from home, but there might be, we might uncover more flexibility. We might uncover jobs that potentially were primarily in the office are jobs that can be working from home more often. So it's I think you'll see a lot of eye-opening scenarios going on around this. Certainly the benefits of less planes flying over my house at the moment, and the less cars on the road, and the less I pay for petrol right now because I'm not going out very much. There definitely are benefits, and we've proven now that we can do it when we have to.
One thing, Simon, before we wrap up, and that is around our responsibility as an organization to inform and educate our employees rather, and our customers. We need to tell our company employees to expect more phishing attacks. That now is when the bad guys will come out of the closet and we'll start looking for vulnerabilities. We'll start looking for especially secure accounts like administrators or anybody with elevated permissions. They will be the attack vector for sure. So we need to inform and educate those people. Good hygiene, as you know, with the virus, it starts with washing your hands before and after you do anything that needs washing your hands for. And so it'll become the norm in IT practice. The IT hygiene will become essential, that before you connect to this application or before you log on, make sure that this is correct. Make sure nobody's tampered with your device or something like that, whatever it might be.
I've just come up with a new acronym we can use for this this time: washing as a service.
IT hygiene,
right? We have Windows as a service, and I've even said to my kids and my wife today, there's a new patch for iOS that comes out now today, and I said, update your phones. Keep your PCs, keep your PCs, your Windows devices up to date. I'm talking to a customer. I just got a request today of a customer now that's moving to 1903 or whatever. They're doing an autopilot deployment, and now they're coming to us around, well, we need to keep these devices up to date. We need to start thinking about our Windows as a service strategy, because I think even now that becomes so important. Even though Stephen and I have been harping on this for years, we're veterans at Microsoft. We've been harping on this for a very, very long time. I think it's very, very important that we keep our systems patched and up to date. You can't let these systems become out of date, because hackers will take advantage of that protection gap, and they will jump through that
straight through
a little bit. Yeah,
that's what they like, is that uncertainty, isn't it? Gentlemen, it's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing your information, knowledge, and expertise. We'll put contact details up in the coming slides. Please get in contact with us for any questions, and we'd be happy to answer that in future sessions. Jeff, Alexander, thank you very much for your time today. Stephen, Dylan, thank you for yours. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Bye-bye.